ask you because I know you don't comment usually on what Trump's saying, but I did find this interesting because obviously gold doesn't move in a vacuum. It moves in relation to trust and trust in what, of course, fiat policy, the dollar. So as we talk about the gold rally over 25% this year, we also have to ask, what's the signal coming from the world's reserve currency? I mean, President Trump just signed that trade deal with the EU that puts a 15% tariff on most of their exports. Right before that, he said something you rarely hear from a U.S. president about wanting a weaker dollar to boost profits. Let's play that clip, Lou.
So I will never say I like a low currency, but you remember the battles I had with the yuan, with China and with Japan, Japan being the yen. They always wanted a weak currency. They're trying to get a weak currency now. Now, it doesn't sound good, but you make a hell of a lot more money with a weaker dollar, not a weak dollar, but a weaker dollar than you do with a strong dollar.
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, has the U.S. effectively abandoned any pretense of defending the dollar as a store of value? And I guess the bigger question here, Tom, is that gold's green light?
Well, I mean, how many more green lights do you need? At this point, you could ask yourself whether the traffic lights have stopped. Yeah. Now, obviously, gold will have corrections. Mm-hmm. Like the Dow had a correction in 1987 that you can no longer see. Those things will happen. And I'm just saying, something going from 250 to 3,000. Well, we're still, as I said, in the foothills of the bull market, but that doesn't mean that you won't have shakeouts along the way. Mm-hmm. Now, one of the points that you're highlighting here is the question of the dollar. First of all, for many, many years, up until relatively recently, when people would ask me in which currency they should be denominated, and that is a very important question. George Soros put it that the most important, indeed, the existential question for any investor is first and foremost, in which currency are you going to be denominated? So you can, make fabulous returns, but if your currency has collapsed, those things can get wiped out and you can be in a net loss. When asked that question, I would put it like this. I would say, look, all paper currencies, for want of a better word, let's call them paper currencies, are toilet tissue. But the dollar is double-ply because it has attributes that these other relative instruments don't have in terms of depth, in terms of capital transfers, the freedom to be able to move it around, its acceptance, etc. I said, therefore, as a paper currency, own the dollar, but the best currency is gold. So my advocacy was for gold and the dollar simultaneously, which some people would look at and say, well, that's contradictory. You need a weak dollar for gold to prosper. And as I just said, in 2007, when I sold my energy company, dollar euro was 147 and the price of gold was around 600. Yeah. It's a myth that you need a weaker dollar for gold to prosper. And so therefore, I don't see that as a green light. What it does provide, however, is the opportunity for those people who maybe don't have a position in gold or a small allocation to be able to give them an ex post facto justification to say, well, now gold is a much safer play because Trump is saying he wants a weaker dollar. I think that essentially right now the United States has got it wrong on the dollar. I think that we believe we're taking a lot of actions around the world which are making people think again of whether 60% of the world's reserve currency should be in the dollar when the United States accounts for less than 25% of global trade or GDP. The reason for that is a function of the attributes that the United States has and the dollar has over other countries. But I think that we're steadily but surely withdrawing some of the perception of those attributes. And so I can't say against which other currencies the dollar will weaken, but I do believe that against gold, the dollar will absolutely collapse.